Hi there. In this video I will show you different techniques on how to record a drum kit. We will see how to set up the overhead microphones as well as different microphone placement to record the bass drum and the snare drum. There are many ways to set up overhead microphones. In this tutorial I will show you four methods called the XY, then we will see the ORTF, and then the space pair, and finally the Glynn-Jones configuration. In terms of microphones, engineers tend to prefer large diaphragm condenser microphones. However, even with small diaphragm condenser microphones, you can achieve great results. The XY and the ORTF technique consist in placing the mic 4 to 5 feet above the kit. In the XY technique, you place the mic at a 90-degree angle, and the capsules have to stay as close as possible. Ideally, they should occupy the same space, but it's virtually impossible. This will give a focus image of the drum kit. On the ORTF configuration instead, you place the mic at 110 degrees with the capsule distancing 6.5 inches from each other. This will again give a focused picture of the drum kit, but with a little bit of a wider stereo image. Another technique to place the overhead microphones is called the space pair technique. This involves the microphone placed at the side of the kit, so that they can capture this area here. You need to imagine like the microphone that captures this area here and this area here. We also maybe try to place them before the kick drum to avoid some phasing issues. And we tend to, for this configuration, the large diaphragm condenser microphones are ideal, but in this case we will use these ones here. And the most important thing is that they have to be equidistant from the snare drum. They have to be at the same distance from the snare drum. And in order to achieve that, if we don't have the measure, we can use a simple cable by placing its one side at the center of the snare, and we can measure like this that they are at the same distance. This one needs to be a little tweak. I usually tend to put them 48 to 54 inches from the snare, and this is because if we place them too close to the cymbals, when the drummer would hit the cymbal, this could cause a phasing issue called Doppler effect, and we don't want that. At the same time, if we place them too far from the cymbals, we might capture too much room and less details, and that wouldn't work right. We want to use this configuration when you want to give a exaggerated stereo image of the kit, a wider exaggerated stereo image of the kit. The last technique I'm going to talk about is called the Glynn-Jones. This is a compromise between the stereo spread image of the space pair technique and another more focused close mic option. This consists in placing a microphone right on top of the snare, and the other microphone behind the tom, pointing the snare. It's important to keep them at the same distance, so you keep the stereo image accurate. And we can use the same trick here by using a cable. With these two mics and a mic for the snare and a mic for the kick drum, it's possible to achieve great results. When it comes to miking the snare drum, you want to go for a dynamic microphone. My favorite microphone is the SM57, which the one I'm used to work the most for is the SM57. It's a great microphone, and many engineers have used it. And depending on how you angle it towards the snare drum, it would change the sound. So you want to try to have a go before recording with a few positions. Say for instance, if you place it from the top looking down towards the center of the snare drum, it would get more of the tone and sustain as well as the attack of the drum. But if you would instead go and make it more flatten and looking still at towards the center, then you would get more attack than sustain. If you want to change and experiment with different angles, you can change the sound in a way that it's totally different. Say that if you point it towards the other board of the snare drum, you get a different sound, or some people even point it towards the shells of the snare. You can see this in the example that we made. And as well as the top mic, if you want to add more thickness and more low end to the snare drum, you want to add a bottom mic. You place it around 3 fingers from the snare drum, and you want to make sure that you invert the phase before recording, because it's gonna cancel the phase if you don't. So yeah, you're gonna hear the example now. To record the kick drum, you want to use a dynamic microphone. Here we have an AKG D112. It's considered one of the best dynamic microphones to record kick drums, and you can see that depending on how you angle the microphone inside the kick drum, you get a surprisingly different sound. Like if you point it towards the center of imagine that this is the inside of the snare of the kick drum. If you point it towards the center of the skin where you get the hit, you will get a weaker sound. Whilst if you just angle it a little bit towards the angle of the skin, you will get a much boomier and low end sound. Whilst even just by placing, even not even have, if you don't place it, if you place it outside, if you take it outside, you can just try different angles and see that if you place it, say, at a certain degree that goes from the skin towards the center of the kick drum, you get a much more attack and low end at the same time. So before recording, I suggest you to have a play with the different positions that you can get and see yourself for what you like the most. You can see in the example now how the different sound